The Borley Rectory, 1927-1939. The most haunted house in England, the enigma of Borley Rectory. In the quiet, rural village of Borley, located in Essex, England, there stood a building that would become infamous as the most haunted house in England. Between 1927 and 1939, Borley Rectory, once a large, imposing Victorian house, became the center of strange occurrences and terrifying phenomena. The legend of Borley Rectory continues to captivate paranormal enthusiasts and true crime followers alike, with tales of ghostly apparitions, strange sounds, and terrifying experiences that have persisted for generations. The story of Borley Rectory is not just about hauntings, but about a relentless mystery that remains unsolved to this day. With its tragic history, ghost sightings, and claims of paranormal activity, Borley Rectory has left an indelible mark on the world of the supernatural. The haunting became so famous that it caught the attention of paranormal investigators, leading to a frenzy of media coverage, investigations, and theories that continue to evolve. This is the story of Borley Rectory, the house where the living and the dead collided in the most horrifying ways. The tale of Borley Rectory begins long before the first paranormal reports emerged. Built in 1863, the rectory was intended to be the residence of the local rector, who would serve the Borley community and manage the surrounding parish. The rectory was located in a secluded area, surrounded by trees and farmland. It was isolated enough to give it an eerie, somber presence. For many years, Borley Rectory was a peaceful and quiet place, where its occupants led normal lives. But in 1927, things began to take an unsettling turn when the new rector, Harry Bull, and his family moved into the house. The Bull family would be at the center of the terrifying stories that would soon begin to surface. The earliest reports of paranormal activity in Borley Rectory began almost immediately after the Bull family took residence. Harry Bull's wife, Mary, was one of the first to experience the strange phenomena. She reported seeing a woman dressed in a white gown, walking through the grounds of the rectory late at night. The figure appeared to be wandering aimlessly, disappearing as quickly as it was spotted. She also began to hear disembodied footsteps and unexplained knocks on the doors. Harry Bull, initially dismissive of these events, soon became a believer himself. As more odd occurrences continued to happen, both he and his family became increasingly unnerved. They would hear footsteps on the stairs when no one was there, and doors would open and close on their own. Strange cold spots would appear in different parts of the house, and objects seemed to move without explanation. Mary Bull, in particular, was disturbed by the appearance of a nun, a spectral figure often seen walking along the garden path. The figure of the nun seemed to vanish before it could be fully seen. Local legend suggested that the apparition was the ghost of a nun who had been buried nearby and whose remains had been disturbed during the construction of the rectory. This ghostly nun would come to be known as the Nun of Borley. The real terror began when Elliot O'Donnell, a noted ghost hunter and writer, investigated the claims in 1929. O'Donnell's findings were deeply disturbing. He reported that the rectory was not only haunted by spirits, but that the house itself was alive with energy. O'Donnell's investigation, published later in various articles and books, suggested that the paranormal activity at Borley Rectory was far more than mere superstition. More accounts of disturbing occurrences followed, especially involving the sounds of strange noises, inexplicable movements of objects, and shadowy figures. It was said that the rectory was filled with a constant feeling of oppressive dread, and even the local townspeople began to take note. Some claimed to have seen ghostly figures at night, while others reported hearing voices calling out from the darkness. But it wasn't just the rectory's interior that seemed to be haunted. People reported seeing ghostly lights around the house, as if the spirits were trying to communicate with the living. Others claim to have seen the figure of a woman in white wandering the grounds late at night. The Borley Rectory gained wider attention in 1929 when Harry Price, a well-known paranormal investigator and writer, became involved with the haunting. Price was an experienced ghost hunter and was fascinated by the reports surrounding the rectory. His investigation would be among the most famous of all paranormal research in history. In 1929, Price, along with his team of investigators, moved into Borley Rectory for a thorough investigation. He began by conducting experiments and setting up recording devices to capture evidence of the haunting. His investigation produced some of the most famous stories associated with the rectory. Price reported witnessing numerous unexplained events during his investigation. He described hearing loud knocks on the walls, doors that would open and close by themselves, and objects that seemed to move of their own accord. Some of the most chilling moments came when Price claimed to have seen flying stones and phantom footsteps that were witnessed by his team. Price's investigations were often controversial, and some critics accused him of fabricating evidence or exaggerating events to make the haunting appear more credible. Nevertheless, Price's investigations brought the Borley Rectory into the public eye, and his involvement cemented its place in the history of paranormal investigations. The haunting took a particularly eerie turn when reports of a ghostly nun began to intensify. Local legend had long spoken of a nun who had been locked in a nearby convent as punishment for a forbidden love affair. The nun was said to have been starved to death, and her restless spirit was said to haunt the Borley Rectory grounds. The figure of the nun was spotted multiple times, often near a certain window or walking in the garden. People also reported hearing the sound of a woman's voice crying out in distress, although no one could find the source of the sound. Other supernatural phenomena included lights that would flicker and move without explanation, mysterious rapping sounds on walls, and even some reports of ghostly figures seen through windows. But the most unsettling phenomenon was the constant feeling of being watched. Guests and investigators who visited Borley Rectory would often report a sense of heavy oppression, as if something was always lurking nearby. The haunting at Borley Rectory reached its peak in the late 1930s, with the activity growing more intense and terrifying. In 1939, a fire broke out in the rectory, causing extensive damage to the building. The fire was suspicious, as some believed that the supernatural forces in the house had caused it. After the fire, the rectory was largely abandoned, and the building was eventually demolished. Despite its demolition, the legend of Borley Rectory lived on. The house and its terrifying history were the subject of books, films, and documentaries. Harry Price's investigations became a key part of the story, and the mystery of the haunting remains unresolved. Was the Borley Rectory truly haunted, or was it all a product of suggestion and fabrication? Today, the site where Borley Rectory once stood remains a quiet and peaceful place, far removed from the terror that once gripped it. Yet the stories of ghostly apparitions, strange sounds, and the mysterious nun continue to haunt the imaginations of those who are drawn to the tale of the most haunted house in England. The story of Borley Rectory remains one of the most famous and chilling cases of paranormal activity in the world. From the eerie sightings of a ghostly nun to the strange phenomena that haunted the house for over a decade, the mystery of Borley Rectory is far from over. The building may be gone, but the legacy of its hauntings lives on. The question of whether Borley Rectory was truly haunted still lingers. Was it a case of restless spirits trying to communicate with the living, or was it simply a product of overactive imaginations? Whatever the truth may be, Borley Rectory's place in the annals of the supernatural is secure. As we close the final chapter of this haunting tale, the mystery of Borley Rectory remains unsolved, but its chilling legacy continues to haunt the minds of those who dare to delve into its dark past. Will we ever know the truth behind the hauntings of Borley Rectory? Perhaps, like the ghosts that once roamed its halls, the answers will remain forever elusive.